how to read the road signs in cooking and know when you've arrived at your destination. Today on the Carefree Cooks Code, I'm Chef Todd Moore, and this is the Carefree Cooks Code, every Tuesday live at noon Eastern. Here's our challenge. How can home cooks cook freely with creativity, confidence, and pride while ignoring recipes and still impressing themselves and others with what they cook? Well, the answer is found in becoming empowered with how cooking works, using dependable and repeatable methods of cooking that work for any ingredient, for any diet, and any desire, just like chefs do. And we'll know we've cracked it when everyone sees cooking as an exciting and rewarding way to improve their relationships, their lifestyles, and their health through better food and cooking. This is the Carefree Cooks Code. Welcome back to the Carefree Cooks Code, everyone. We are live together every Tuesday at noon Eastern, and if you're surprised by that fact, you should go to webcookingclasses.com got the slash right this time, /live, and register for my alert system, because that's what I put out, an alert when I'm about to go live. We are the Carefree Cooks. We create our own recipes. This always winds up bringing friends and family together. We learn every time we cook, and this helps us define our own cooking styles because we practice pro cooking methods, and this makes us love our cooking. How we doing, everyone? Back together again today. Hi, Diane. Hi, Michael and Eloisa and Bob and Jerry and Peter and Guy and Grammy is with us, and Candy and everyone. I can't just read names all day long because then it would be a half hour of that. I get so excited for Tuesday. I don't know about you guys, but I look forward to thinking about what I'm going to share with you all the time, thinking about how I can impact more and more people and get you to cook the way I do. It's as simple as that. I love my cooking. When I come up with something really, really cool, I get so excited about it, and I'm always like, oh, I wish I could tell everybody about this, and that's why we do our Carefree Cooks Code broadcast. I've got a What Am I for you today. There's the What Am I. Looks like a bunch of numbers. So tell me in the comments, if you've been following me for a little while, you probably know what those numbers are, but tell me in the comments, what's the What Am I today? This is a culinary college test, by the way. That is, I give them just that, and they know what I'm talking about. So, and when we're done today, you're going to know what I'm talking about also, because I have a big question for you, all right? This is a big question. Do you always know where you're going? Now think about that for a minute, okay? I mean it in both ways. Literally, when you leave your house, when you start walking, when you start driving somewhere, do you always know where you're going? Or let's just say figuratively, is there a goal in sight for you? Do you know where you're going? You get it? Is there somewhere that you're headed to in general, no matter where you literally are or literally headed to today? Is there somewhere that you're headed in general? Do you get what I'm saying? Are you going somewhere? And I mean, sure, sometimes we lose our way. Sometimes we forget where we're headed, where we're going, right in the middle of where we're going. You ever do that? You ever walk into a room to get something, and when you get there, you're like, why am I in this room? You know, or you're sifting through a drawer looking for something. Halfway through, you're like, what the heck am I even looking for? Sometimes we forget about our journey right in the middle of it. And that's why I always call this progression of your cooking skills a journey, because it always continues, right? You're always on your way to somewhere. It doesn't ever stop, and it can be really confusing. But if you've been there before, if you've seen these confusing signs, if you've reached your destination once prior, if you've been successful, well, then it makes it so much easier to find this road to success, this destination, the second time or the third time or the fourth time. Every time you do it, it gets easier and easier, right? Because once you know the road markers, no matter how confusing they may be, once you see them again and again, then you can actually see that you're on the right path to where you're going, whether it's where you're going today or where you're going in your lifetime. And it's the same thing with cooking. There are road markers in cooking that can help you speed up your journey because you see them again and again, no matter where you're headed. If you're headed to chicken, or if you're headed to hamburger, or if you're headed to salad, if you're in your cooking car and you're headed that way, the more times that you're successful with this, the more times that you can see the correct path. You getting with me? But look, here's the problem. Most home cooks, they ignore these road markers because they're focused on time. They're focused on how long to cook something, at what temperature to cook it. And we all know cooking by time and oven temperature is the absolute worst way to cook, but it's the way that everybody is taught. This is like driving while you're looking at your watch, you got your GPS on your phone, you got a cup of coffee going on. How are you ever going to see the road markers? How will you ever know when you've arrived? And arrived is the success that gives you the experience to arrive there more quickly again and again. This is why, again, it's a journey, it's a cycle. Can you recognize all the road markers in cooking so that when you go past that path again, it becomes that much easier? These are the road markers in cooking, and these are the ones that recipe followers and TV show watchers, they never learn about, because none of these road markers are in any cookbook, any recipe book I have ever seen in my life. None of them talk about this. But these are the same road markers that I'm going to share with you today. But first, let me illustrate my point with a true story, since so many people told me last week they love my stories. Heather and I love Hawaii. We honeymooned in Hawaii 19 years ago, and all the photos back here, they're all pictures of Hawaii. We immediately fell in love with it. And one of the great things about Hawaii is that it's a lot of wilderness. Okay, there aren't a lot of guardrails, handrails. There aren't a lot of signs. Things aren't really paved. There aren't a lot of park rangers to guide you, point things out. It's not a Disney amusement park. In Hawaii. It's real. It's beautiful. It's a natural place. And Heather and I, we love to explore. We love to find the hidden waterfalls and the secret hiking spots, the things that really few people know about. And this is especially true for us when it comes to snorkeling. We love to get in the water and snorkel in Hawaii because you just keep your snorkel gear in the back of the car and you drive around and you can always find some side road to turn off, and eventually you're going to hit the water, because any road in Hawaii, if you think about this, no matter which island you're on, it either goes up a mountain, goes down to the shore, or goes round and round, right? You're on an island, on a cinder cone, basically. So it's really easy to get around. So we like finding these hidden snorkeling spots, the things that tourists don't know about because we've been going there for 20 years. And, if you can get in the water, some places are really kind of violent. Some of these spots are just really, really crazy. There are some that have waves that crash up against the jagged rock. They spray like 20 feet in the air. I mean, it's really, really violent. There's one that's called the washing machine, because if you get caught in it, it swirls you around, it scrapes you against the lava rock, and then it spits you out to sea. A lot of people have met their demise in that way. It's not exactly a tranquil spot for snorkeling, but what we look for is the nice tranquil spot. Don't want to get spit out to sea. And you can pull off the road just about anywhere, like I said, in Hawaii, and find a spot. But we want to know about the really special spots, the ones that only the locals know about. And I heard about this really amazing snorkeling spot. Somebody told me it was supposed to be like a hot tub carved out of lava, sitting high on a cliff, watching those crashing waves. I mean, it sounded amazing. It was protected by the rocks and the reef. It was shallow, so it was warm. We wouldn't get washing machined, ground up and spit out to sea. Not what I wanted to happen on my honeymoon, ground up and spit out to sea. So we really wanted to snorkel this really calm lava pool that was right next to the violent ocean. But here's the thing, getting to my point. The thing about Hawaiians is they're not really precise with their directions. You know, when you're a local and you just kind of know things, and again, it might be because, like I said, there's no park rangers, there's no signs, things like that, but there aren't a lot of unique landmarks to go by. And the first person to tell us about this special snorkeling spot told us what road it was on and explained that it was 0.2 of a mile before the end of the road. And we said, great! We jumped in the car, we started heading out, Heather and I, and we're about halfway there, and I said to Heather, hey, how are we supposed to know when we're 0.2 of a mile before the end of the road? I hadn't been there before. And again, you don't want to get lost in Hawaii, right? You don't want to get lost going down some of these dirt roads. There aren't a lot of tow trucks. There's, of course, the problem of telling the tow truck where you are. I could probably tell him I'm 0.2 of a mile before the end of the road, and he would know and I wouldn't. But this kind of stuff makes me really nervous, all right? And I'm getting really nervous about this secret snorkeling spot and the very vague directions we've gotten. I'm starting to lose confidence, right? It doesn't seem like as much fun anymore. It's starting to seem like a chore. You get where I'm going with this? It was making me really tense to think that I was not going to be successful. So we guessed at it. Right? We just started guessing. We went to the end of the road, we turned around, we went back 0.2 of a mile in reverse. That kind of makes sense. We parked the car, we got out, I think we climbed over a wall. We started walking over these rocks with our snorkeling gear and our bathing suits. We're looking for this hidden beach, and we look to our right, and there's people having dinner in their kitchen. We were walking in their backyard. That wasn't cool. So we ran, right? We ditched it. We went over another wall. We wound up in a churchyard and walking among like gravestones and stuff. Like, this can't be right either. We made it back to the car. We're like, all right, we got to figure this out. So I saw someone walking along the dirt road. I stopped them. I rolled down the window. I was like, hey, how's it, brah? You know, trying to be a local, but sounding like Kaoli. I asked him about the snorkeling spot, and he said to me, oh, yeah, man, it's another 5 minutes down the road. And I said, great. We get in the car, we start pulling away 5 minutes down the road. At what speed? 5 minutes at 60 miles an hour, or 5 minutes at 10 miles an hour? Oh, my God. The vague instructions, right? They're so frustrating. And I don't know how we eventually figured it out. We did. We got there somehow, but it was a magnificent spot. We were rewarded. The water was crystal clear. We were rewarded with all kinds of fish that we saw. We saw a big sea turtle. We swam with the sea turtle, and we enjoyed this day so much. But I knew I had to get back here again. So as I'm driving away, I'm looking in the rear view mirror for the potential road markers that I'm going to remember when I come back the next time. And in my rear view mirror, I see things like a particularly large palm tree, right? And then there's a fence, and there was a big black lava rock. So when I come back another day, I now know palm tree, fence, lava rock. These are the road markers in my mind that overcome the vague instructions that I got. And this whole experience, these vague instructions, these things that I couldn't possibly know, but everybody else seemed to. Right? Everybody else took them as fact, except for the people that hadn't been there before. And it seemed that every Hawaiian knew that the snorkeling spot was 0.2 of a mile before the end of the road, or after 5 minutes of driving, whatever it was. But they didn't realize that if you hadn't been there before, you're not going to be able to figure it out. You're not going to be able to recognize where 0.2 of a mile before the end of the road is. And this is years before I ever opened a cooking school. This is years before I ever thought about teaching online. I mean, this is decades ago I'm telling this story. But when I eventually did open my cooking school, I used to tell this Hawaii snorkeling spot story all the time to the new students because I thought it had a direct correlation to cooking and recipes. Recipes are the vague directions. Recipes are the things that if you haven't been there before, you just don't know what to look for. You don't know the road signs. So when a recipe tells you to heat the pan for 3 to 5 minutes or cook for 3 to 5 minutes, it's like the guy telling me to drive for 5 minutes. without telling me what to look for, without telling me how I'm going to recognize my destination. And knowing what to look for, recognizing the road markers, that's the way to do it. It's so much better than vague directions, because the big lie that recipes are telling you is that you should cook by time and temperature. How long to cook something at some uncontrollable oven temperature, that's the best way to cook. And how do they know how long I should cook it in the first place? Maybe my chicken breast is twice as big. Maybe my oven is hotter or cooler. Maybe my oven temperature is lying to me. I've never found an oven that was actually truthful. How do they know what my pan is made out of? Different metals heat differently. How do they know what altitude I'm at, which is going to affect the cooking times? Look, with all the variables that aren't accounted for when cooking by time and temperature, it's no wonder that home cooks experiences this unbelievable inconsistency in their cooking. Sometimes great, sometimes not. It's because they have trouble finding their destination in cooking, just like I did in Hawaii, because I was given vague directions for the snorkeling spot. But now that I've been there a few times, now that I can recognize with my eyes where the snorkeling spot is, I arrive at my destination perfectly every time. And it's the same with cooking. Because look, in culinary school, I don't teach. Can you imagine a chef standing up in front of the class? You're never going to hear me tell the students, cook at 350 degrees for 25 minutes. And actually, this is one of my favorite questions to answer, because the students invariably will ask me, and they learn quickly, Chef, how long should I cook this? And you know the answer is always the same. Until it's done. How long should I cook it? Until it's done. And they scratch their heads and they look around, they look down at their shoes and they go, hey chef, how do I tell when it's done? Now that's a much better question. How do I tell when it's time to stop cooking? And here comes the whole point. All right, here comes your aha moment. And if you take nothing else from my story today, nothing else with what I'm sharing with you today, take this to heart. Memorize it. Internalize it. Make it your own. Because my students are empowered and trained with the 4 effects of heat on food. This is the roadmap to all of cooking. Because instead of vague directions, the 4 effects of heat on food are like the big palm tree, the big black lava rock, the fence that I recognized on the second time on my way to the secret snorkeling spot. The 4 effects of heat on food is the way the professionals cook, because it's quantifiable. It's measurable. It's not vague like 0.2 of a mile before the end of the road or 350 degrees for 20 minutes. So I'm going to share with you all the keys to cooking right now, the roadmap that every food item goes through, and how you can recognize them for yourself. These are the 4 effects of heat on food, and you can recognize them. You've got all the road markers. So if you have all the road markers, you can watch your food instead of timing your food, all right? So let's go through this really quickly, because if you start to cook this way, your cooking will change forever. The first road marker happens at 150 degrees Fahrenheit or about 65 Celsius, and this is called gelatinization of starches. Starches absorb liquids and swell. You know this if you've ever made a sauce, if you've ever made rice, if you've ever made pasta. And when you can recognize that you should stop adding milk to your sauce because the flour has absorbed as much as it possibly can. When you can recognize when not to add more moisture to rice, or how to cook rice in different methods, you are commanding gelatinization of starches. The next important temperature is at 165 degrees Fahrenheit or 74 Celsius, and this is coagulation of proteins. At this temperature, proteins stiffen and shrink. This is your hamburger that gets smaller as you cook it. This is any kind of pork chop or tofu or seitan or tempeh, or any kind of plant-based protein will shrink as well. The next road marker that you can see, is 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius. This is the one most people know. This is the temperature at which water boils. It turns to steam. It enters the atmosphere. It's called evaporation of moisture, and this is how you dry things out. When you cook, if you spend too much time in the evaporation of moisture zone, you get something that is dry, and since you probably spent too much time in coagulation of proteins, something that's kind of stiff too. So when you start to work with these temperatures, you're eventually going to arrive at 320 degrees Fahrenheit or about 160 Celsius, and this is when sugars turn brown and they get brittle. It's called caramelization of sugars, and it's that beautiful brown plate appearance, right, on your chicken breast or your scallops. It's those gorgeous grill marks on your steak or your vegetable. This is what gives appearance to your dishes. This is what sweetens dishes. This is when you want to brown something without drying it out and making it too stiff. You get how these four temperatures work together? Because when you start to cook with the four effects of heat on food, it's like having every road marker laid out right in front of you, no matter where you're headed that day or where you're headed as a global lifetime goal. When you know when to turn, when you know when to speed up, when you know when to slow down, and most importantly, when you can recognize that you've arrived at your location, that's when you're cooking with skill. And the best home cooks I know and the best professionals I know, they cook by the way food reacts to heat. They react to the changes in the food. They don't use a clock. They don't listen to what their oven dial says. They use a thermometer, and they know exactly when they have arrived at that secret snorkeling spot of cooking. The perfect nirvana, because they didn't measure it with a watch. They measured it by the recognition of when they got there. Hey, let's see who's using the four effects of heat on food skillfully in our Carefree Cooks community on Facebook this week, because it's time for the dish of the week. And since we're talking about the four effects of heat on food, I went scrolling through the Carefree Cooks community to find examples of it that happen in everyday cooking. Now, these are the lifetime members of web cooking classes. These are the cream of the crop, boys and girls. So I'm going to show you some really cool stuff. If you're not there yet, if you can't make stuff like this yet, maybe it's because you're not concentrating on the effects of heat on food. First, Carol made a crab mac and cheese. Right to my heart, Carol. All we need is some Old Bay for the good old Maryland spice. I'm sure it's in there. I know you would. But gelatinization of starches. She had to make some elbow macaroni. The macaroni absorbs the liquid and swells. It becomes softer. You stop cooking it at the perfect time. She made a cheese sauce for her mac and cheese. There had to be some kind of starch in there. The starch absorbs the milk. It expands and thickens the sauce. Gelatinization of starches. Jan made a nice rice and beans dish. Gelatinization of starches. Rices absorb liquid and swell. Gelatinization of starches. Peter used a roux to thicken his sauce on his, I forget what it is, pork chop, I think. Beautiful, nice sauce. He talked about making his roux, a nice brown roux, adding the liquid to it, watching it thicken. Gelatinization of starches, one of the four effects of heat on food. Coagulation of protein. Bob made some great pork chops this week. A sauce with maple syrup, ketchup, and soy sauce. I like that combination. That's really cool. But I'm sure he watched his pork chop go from a pork chop this big, put it in the oven, it's a pork chop this big. It's coagulation of proteins. Michael did a pork loin with peach glaze as well. If you want to see something shrink, coagulation of proteins, put a tenderloin or a whole muscle cut of meat in the oven and see how it gets half the size of when you put it in. The next one is evaporation of moisture, right? Well, Len had to cut down his herb garden, put all that in the oven under drying heat, evaporation of moisture. Len dried all his herbs this week. What a better example of the evaporation of moisture, right? How about caramelization of sugars? Whoa! Look at Chris. He put some serious grill marks on those steaks. The thing that makes those grill marks so great is it's only on the mark. Like if you look at this picture in between the grill marks, you don't see other charred area. So that shows me he got that grill really nice and hot first. And that's not just for proteins. Look what Michael did with hash brown potatoes. I mean, wouldn't you love those hash browns, maybe with some scrambled eggs in the morning? They're so crispy and crunchy on top. It's caramelization of sugars. And when you're able to control all these effects of heat on food, when you can cook with a focus on the result of applying heat to food, you become a truly empowered cook that never has to stop and ask for directions, right? When you can stop worrying, right? Let's stop all this worrying. Let's stop all the questions, all the doubt that swirls around in your mind, and start cooking with confidence. Start cooking with creativity. Be proud of what you've created. And then the next day, just be ready to invent something new. You don't need another recipe. You need the confidence to let that creativity come out. And I'm telling you, learning to recognize the road signs, learning to recognize the 4 effects of heat on food is the thing that sets you free. So I'm sure those that have been in web cooking classes, or anyone that's been a culinary student of mine, they recognize those 4 temperatures right away. And if this is the first you're discovering about the 4 effects of heat on food, you're going to recognize those temperatures like as a photo of yourself. You would not believe how many times I drill this into culinary students' heads. So when they see that group of temperatures, they immediately know what it is, and they repeat it like a mantra. Gelatinization of starches, coagulation of proteins, evaporation of moisture, caramelization of sugars. Know it, live it, love it. It's the 4 effects of heat on food. It's the way that you become truly empowered in the kitchen, for sure. Cooking by recognizing the effects of heat on food instead of staring at a clock is one of the discoveries that can change your cooking overnight. And if you like this video, if you need someone to change their focus on cooking, like this video. Please share it with your friends and family so that they can change their cooking as well. And my free online class this week, hundreds of people took it last week. It's the 3 cooking discoveries to change your food from fair to fantastic. I wonder what the other 2 are. I might have spilled one of them today, but there's still 2 more. And if you want to know how to start your own culinary journey to become empowered with how cooking works, get started by holding your spot in my next class right away. Go to webcookingclasses.com/discover. And it's Chef Todd Moore reminding you that there's a method to your cooking success. We'll see you next Tuesday, everyone. Bye-bye.